Discipline is not punishment, it's self-respect, because when we think of discipline only as a form of restriction, we miss the deeper truth that it is actually an act of honoring ourselves and our potential, a choice to live in alignment with what we say we value rather than being controlled by fleeting impulses. And when we commit to discipline, we are not depriving ourselves but protecting our time, energy, and focus for what matters most, creating a life that reflects intention rather than accident. It is the recognition that every decision we make, whether small or large, shapes the person we become, and when we choose discipline, we are quietly telling ourselves that our future is worth investing in, our health is worth preserving, our dreams are worth fighting for, and our word to ourselves is worth keeping, because nothing erodes self-trust more quickly than abandoning our own promises, and nothing builds it more powerfully than the daily practice of showing up even when it's hard, even when motivation is absent, even when no one notices. Discipline is not about punishment or perfection, but about self-compassion in action, because it acknowledges that our higher goals will sometimes require us to endure discomfort, to delay gratification, or to stand apart from the easy choices that tempt us. And in those moments, choosing discipline is not about being harsh with ourselves, but about being kind enough to protect the version of us we are becoming, a version that deserves strength, clarity, and resilience. True discipline is the opposite of punishment because it is never about diminishing who we are, but about cultivating the conditions where we can thrive, whether that means creating healthy habits, committing to our work, or setting boundaries that prevent us from giving away our time carelessly. And each time we practice discipline, we are strengthening the muscle of self-respect, learning that we can be trusted with our own potential, that we are capable of following through, and that our lives can be built on choices that reflect dignity rather than regret, because discipline is not a cage but a key, a reminder that freedom does not come from doing whatever feels easy in the moment, but from having the strength to live with integrity and intention. And when we begin to view discipline not as a punishment imposed on us, but as a profound act of self-respect, we stop seeing it as the enemy and start embracing it as one of the most powerful expressions of love we can offer ourselves. Consistency beats intensity. Small choices compound into transformation, because real change is never the result of a single burst of effort or a dramatic display of willpower, but the quiet repetition of actions that seem almost insignificant in the moment. Yet over time they stack, layer by layer, into something extraordinary. When you think about how mountains are formed, they are not the product of one great shift, but of countless small movements over ages. And in the same way, our habits, our choices, and our behaviors carve out the shape of our lives, often unnoticed until the difference becomes undeniable, for intensity may bring a spark of motivation or a surge of effort. But consistency is the force that carries us forward when excitement fades, when obstacles rise, when discipline is tested. And while anyone can commit to something for a day or a week, the true transformation belongs to the person who chooses to show up again and again, even when the results are not immediate. It is in the daily practice, the small commitments honored quietly, where the seeds of growth take root, like writing a page every morning until a book appears, taking a short walk each day until health improves, saving a little each month until financial security builds. Because transformation is not about dramatic change in an instant, but about the compounding of small steps taken with intention. And what makes this powerful is that it's accessible to everyone, since no one needs to overhaul their entire life overnight, but everyone can make one better choice today and repeat it tomorrow. And that repetition becomes identity, shaping not only what we do, but who we believe ourselves to be. Consistency creates trust with ourselves, showing us that we are capable of following through, and each small choice becomes proof that we can rely on our own actions, which builds confidence stronger than any motivational speech or fleeting burst of inspiration ever could. And while intensity can burn bright and fast, often leaving us exhausted, consistency sustains like a steady flame that warms and endures, allowing us to carry forward with balance and patience. So the key is not in chasing dramatic efforts that cannot be maintained, but in nurturing the courage to keep choosing the small things, the overlooked things, the daily things that others dismiss, because it is precisely those choices that quietly accumulate into strength, skill, resilience, and transformation. And when we look back, it is rarely the big moments that define our lives, but the accumulation of small, deliberate acts that seemed ordinary, but in truth held the power to change everything. Boundaries are acts of freedom, not limitation, because they are not walls that shut life out, but doors that guide what we allow in, a way of protecting our time, energy, and values so that we can live with greater clarity and purpose. And when we set boundaries, we are not depriving ourselves of connection or opportunity, but creating space for the connections and opportunities that truly align with who we are and where we want to go. Too often boundaries are misunderstood as harsh rules meant to keep people away, but in reality they are expressions of self-respect and clarity, reminders that we cannot give our best if we are constantly drained by overcommitment, people pleasing, or neglecting our own needs, and far from being selfish, they allow us to show up more authentically and sustainably for others, because when our energy is protected, our presence becomes genuine instead of forced. Boundaries teach us to distinguish between what serves us and what diminishes us, between what brings us closer to growth and what pulls us into patterns of distraction, resentment, or exhaustion. And though they can be uncomfortable to set, because they sometimes mean disappointing others or stepping away from familiar habits, they are ultimately acts of courage, small declarations that we are willing to honor our values even when it costs us approval. And in that courage lies real freedom, the freedom to choose how we spend our days, the freedom to align with relationships that are mutual and nourishing rather than draining, the freedom to direct our energy toward goals that matter instead of scattering it across demands that only leave us empty. Boundaries are not about control, but about choice, about reclaiming our power to decide what we will and will not accept in our lives. And when we begin to practice them consistently, we discover that they are less about shutting the world out and more about letting our true selves in. Because without them, we become fractured, endlessly pulled by the needs and opinions of others, while with them, we become whole, grounded in a life that reflects our deepest priorities. Every time we say no to something misaligned, we are saying yes to something greater, whether that's rest, focus, creativity, or simply peace. And the more we honor those yeses, the more our lives become shaped by freedom rather than obligation. Boundaries are not chains that hold us back, but wings that give us space to rise. Because only when we protect the core of who we are can we fully offer ourselves to the world without resentment, without burnout, and without losing sight of the person we are meant to become. Self-discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now, because in every moment of temptation there is a silent battle between short-term comfort and long-term fulfillment, and the strength to pause, reflect, and act in alignment with your deeper goals is what separates progress from regret. It is easy to give in to what feels good in the present, the extra hour of sleep, the indulgence that derails health, the distraction that pushes aside meaningful work. But those choices often steal from the future we claim to want, while discipline demands that we lift our eyes beyond the present urge and focus on the life we are building, reminding ourselves that what we want now may bring ease, but what we want most brings transformation, and that transformation cannot be bought with shortcuts or impulsive decisions, but only with patience, sacrifice, and commitment. Every time you choose the harder path in service of what matters, you strengthen not only your will but your identity, proving to yourself that you are someone who honors your word and protects your vision, and that trust in yourself becomes a foundation more valuable than any temporary relief. Discipline does not mean stripping joy from life, but redefining joy as the satisfaction that comes from staying true to your purpose, from knowing that the choices you make today are planting seeds for a future you will be proud to harvest. And while the present moment often whispers lies about ease and comfort, your deepest desires call for endurance and resilience, and the act of choosing long-term fulfillment over instant gratification is where character is built. Though it may feel uncomfortable to delay a reward or to push through when motivation fades, each act of discipline creates momentum, and momentum creates transformation, so that eventually the life you once thought required massive leaps is built from countless small but intentional choices. Discipline is not about deprivation, but about alignment, the courage to say no to distractions so you can say yes to becoming the person you are meant to be. And when you begin to consistently choose what you want most over what you want now, you discover a deeper freedom. The freedom of living with self-respect, with integrity, with the knowledge that your actions match your values. And that freedom becomes far more rewarding than anything immediate gratification could ever provide. Discomfort is not the enemy, it's the path to growth, because every meaningful transformation requires stepping beyond the edges of what feels safe and familiar. And while our instincts tell us to retreat from struggle, it is within those uncomfortable spaces that strength, resilience, and wisdom are forged. Growth is never found in the comfort zone, because the comfort zone is where routine keeps us still. But discomfort is the space where we are tested, where we discover capabilities we didn't know we had, and where we learn to trust ourselves in the face of uncertainty. And though it may sting, stretch, and unsettle us, it also awakens parts of us that would otherwise remain dormant. Discomfort comes in many forms: facing failure, admitting vulnerability, taking risks, enduring discipline, or letting go of what no longer serves us. But each one is a teacher disguised as struggle, showing us where we need to be braver, where we need to practice patience, and where we need to shed the old versions of ourselves to make space for the new. The temptation is always to avoid discomfort, to cling to ease, but the cost of avoidance is stagnation, a life lived smaller than it could be, while the reward of leaning into discomfort is growth that reshapes not only what we can do, but who we believe we are. When you run toward challenge instead of away from it, you rewire the story you tell yourself about your own strength, and each time you endure discomfort, you prove that you are more resilient than you imagined, and that proof compounds into confidence. Discomfort sharpens focus, builds endurance, and teaches humility, because it reminds us that progress is earned, not given, and that we cannot grow by staying within the boundaries of what is easy, predictable, or instantly rewarding. In fact, the very moments we wish to escape often become the turning points that redefine us, because pushing through fear, struggle, or resistance creates breakthroughs that no amount of comfort could ever provide. Discomfort asks us to be patient when results are not immediate, to be courageous when outcomes are uncertain, and to be persistent when giving up would be easier. And by answering that call, we cultivate a deeper kind of strength. Not just physical or mental strength, but the strength of character that comes from knowing we can sit with uncertainty and still move forward. Growth is not smooth or gentle, but raw, messy, and often painful, yet it is precisely that discomfort that sculpts resilience and clarity. And when we begin to see it not as an obstacle but as a pathway, we stop running from it and start embracing it as the very proof that we are alive, evolving, and stepping closer to the person we are meant to become. Discipline creates trust with yourself, and that trust builds confidence, because every time you commit to an action and follow through, you are not only moving closer to a goal, but also proving to yourself that your word has weight, that your promises to yourself matter, and this proof accumulates into an unshakable belief in your own reliability, which becomes the foundation of true confidence. The mistake many people make is believing that confidence is something you must feel before taking action. But the truth is that confidence is the result of action, specifically disciplined action repeated over time, because when you consistently choose to do what you said you would do, even in the face of distraction or difficulty, you reinforce the idea that you can be trusted to handle challenges, to persevere, and to rise above excuses, and that trust becomes a source of inner strength no one can take away. Without discipline, self-trust erodes, because every broken promise to ourselves chips away at our belief that we are capable of change, leaving us dependent on fleeting motivation or the approval of others. But with discipline, even in the smallest acts, Build a track record of reliability that serves as undeniable evidence of our ability to create results. This is why seemingly small habits, waking up at the time you set, honoring your commitments, finishing the task you started, are not trivial but transformative because they train you to respect your own standards, and over time, this respect grows into a confidence that does not need to be performed but simply exists, rooted in the quiet certainty that you can count on yourself. Discipline and self-trust also free you from fear of failure because when you trust yourself to show up and keep trying, failure no longer feels like a verdict but part of the process. And confidence grows not because you expect perfection, but because you know you have the resilience to keep moving forward. This kind of confidence is far deeper than arrogance or bravado because it isn't based on appearances or external validation but on lived experience. The memory of every moment when you resisted temptation, pushed through discomfort, or chose long-term vision over short-term relief, and each of those moments becomes a brick in the foundation of unshakable confidence. In the end, discipline is not about control for the sake of control, but about teaching yourself that your choices matter, your effort matters, and your dreams are safe in your own hands. And the more you practice discipline, the more you strengthen the trust that builds confidence, until one day you look back and realize that the person you once doubted has become the person you now fully believe in.